A lot of the learning in psychology and the way they assess you is based on the research. It's the sort of idea of you always have to cite your evidence. So instead of them just teaching you, this is how this thing works, they will say, there was a study that did this and showed that this is how this thing works. So you're always grounding all of your knowledge in those studies. So you have to be able to talk about what they did instead of just the broad concept, which is something that really caught me out in my first exam. So something that definitely comes up a lot more in university than in high school is talking about really referencing your research and researching effectively, which are definitely two separate things. So in terms of referencing your research correctly, I guess a simple way to break that down is academia and researching is all about building on other people's ideas. And if you came up with something really cool and then someone else just told everyone about it and never credited you, you'd probably be pretty upset. So a lot of it is just about making sure that you're acknowledging that, hey, whilst I brought something new to this conversation, a lot of my ideas were built upon what this person said or what this person said. Building on from that is really researching effectively. So if you know how to reference things, that's one part of it, but it's also about being able to read through what someone's saying, and you'll hear the term critically evaluating things a lot, which sounds very complicated and scary, but you're basically just thinking about what they're writing down instead of just accepting it as fact. So looking through it and saying, okay, what's their point? Could they have done this differently? Just really thinking about it and making sure that you understand it on a bit of a deeper level. But, you know, in a high school assignment, you might end up referencing one or two people throughout the whole assignment, but in university, pretty much any sentence you say or any paragraph that you say that introduces a new idea, there's probably, even if you didn't technically take it from a researcher, there's probably someone who's spoken about that in the past, so you'll have to go and look for that. Pretty much everything you write, you'll have to think, okay, what am I grounding this on? So it's just a bit more of a sheer volume of understanding, you know, when you need to reference people and how you're going to make sure that you're representing their ideas in a way that isn't just straight up stealing from them. I think when you come in, they will point you to a lot of different databases and places that you can find all your papers, and it's genuinely really overwhelming. They'll say, you know, you can go on ProPsych or PubMed or these places and enter in all these keywords, and they give you all these crazy techniques for searching with keywords and that sort of thing. I've found that Google Scholar is absolutely perfect. That's pretty much all that I use. So the way that Google Scholar works is that you get access to all the papers through your institution, and it's just like a really great search engine like Google. It's just a search engine but for papers. I find that it's a lot easier to sort of define what you're searching for, and it just gives you 5 great like articles right away. And a lot of the time you might not be able to access those, but then you just take that article and put it into more sort of fancy or complicated features, and then you'll have the article ready to go. Peer-reviewed research is something that you hear a lot in psychology and science. So if you're a researcher, you might be conducting a study, you find all your results and you report them, you say this is what we found, and instead of just people being able to publish anything whenever they want, that would essentially just be like a comment section on the internet. It has to be reviewed by other people in the same field to make sure that what they're saying is true or they haven't done anything that's particularly dodgy. So you might finish a paper and you'll send it off to, you know, a board of 3 or 5 or whatever people, and they'll read through it and say, you know, are they lying in some way? Did they do something really poorly? Is something not explained very well? And if there's something they don't like, they'll send it back to that person and say, okay, rewrite this, like almost like you get feedback from a teacher or something. So when you're looking at articles, you want them to be peer reviewed because it's basically like it went through a second layer of defense and other people reading it who are very, very smart, much smarter than you and I, and they've said, okay, this is a good paper to read. So it gives you that confidence that what you're reading is actually, you know, scientifically well put together. In your first year, you're learning how to correctly format according to psychological papers, and you're learning how to write correctly and cite things correctly. And they sort of throw you in the deep end, but in a really exciting way, because from straight away, instead of easing you into it, you're almost writing something that could be evaluated for a paper potentially. Probably not to the same degree, but there's still broadly putting the same standards onto you. So it can feel really cool because you come straight in and you already sort of feel like, oh, I'm actually doing research, or I'm actually putting something together or trying to present something new instead of just repeating what has come before it. So that opportunity to have that feeling of, critically evaluating things and presenting your own ideas starts up straight away. And it's definitely a learning curve. Like, it can definitely be quite a few things that you need to learn, but it can have a really nice feeling about it too as you learn these skills. And I just remember, putting together my first assignment and looking at how it was formatted, and I was just like, this looks so cool. Like, I've pretty much written up a paper, a much shorter one, but it was a really nice feeling.
For incoming students, I'd say that referencing research, all of that is incredibly different. And I found that especially in doing law and PPE. So, for instance, with law, we have a whole separate citations in Australia that I never realized and I had no idea, but it's so specific. So, trying to get used to that, honestly, and even wrapping my head around it, super hard. But learning from your mistakes, asking for feedback, is super duper important. In terms of researching and assignments, especially from my perspective and from my background, it requires a lot more research, especially in the politics and philosophy assignments, just because it is very heavy on your opinion, but you need something to support said opinion. So, definitely doing your research. I find that the best way to approach an assignment for me is to have a detailed plan, like writing down to the T which evidence I'm going to use, definitely referencing that throughout the plan. So even just having, okay, this quote right here was from this source and just linking it in a comment. That's it. So I can come back and reference it later. I think something that I've definitely learned along the way whilst doing assignments is the importance of incorporating theories, which is pretty much just ideas or perspectives that previous really important people have come up with in understanding a particular, I guess, political ideal or philosophical idea. So you pretty much use the theory to back up your point. So I might say, the sky is blue. Why is the sky blue? Because this theorist said that the sky is blue. So it's really important in politics and philosophy, from what I found, to incorporate theories to support your argument, because otherwise your argument is a bit redundant, pretty much.
The main thing that I wasn't used to when I was in high school was just like making sure that I had really reliable sources. And so that meant that you have to really seek out specific websites, specific journals and articles, which is something that I wasn't really well acquainted with in high school. And so that was definitely a really big change and an expectation in my degree. Also, the other thing for research is referencing. That was a really big change as well. Specifically, arts, there's like a million different ways you can reference. And so you just have to work out which one works best with what you're writing with and your faculty, what it asks. But also for law, there's actually a specific like legal citation that you need to learn. And so they were really big differences in expectation. It wasn't the same as, copying and pasting a URL at the bottom of my document or something. You really have to reference and make sure that you're using reliable sources. When I first started uni, the way that I would research for my assignments and exams was sort of just get a bunch of sources that kind of match the question and I could pull from each of them. I still do that now, but I think I narrow it down a little more. I sort of plan my assignment before I even start researching. And so I narrow it down to what exactly I want to write about, because usually, more often than not, your assignments are going to be based off what you learnt in class. And so I sort of look at my class notes first and I think like, what direction do I want to go with this? And then that really helps me narrow down the direction of my researching, because it's a big task in itself is researching, like even more so than writing that assignment. So rigorous research is important to my arts law degree, and I think to many other degrees as well, because when you're at university and when you write anything, you sort of need to know what you're talking about and you need to have things to back up what you're saying. And that is just drilled into us in arts all the time, because a lot of our essays can be really subjective sometimes. And so having those, journals and people who can also back up what you want to say can really, really strengthen your assignment. More than anything else, it just helps you strengthen your voice in your assignment. My tip is do your bibliography and your references as you're going. Don't leave it to the last minute, because it is a little bit of a feat in itself. And so getting it done as you're going really minimizes how big the task actually is. And so as soon as you're finished your first draft, you also have your bibliography done, and that is out of the way. And so you can just keep reviewing your draft and submit your assignment when you need to. But I wish I told myself that in first year, because sometimes I was doing my assignments really last minute and I was like, oh, I'll just leave the referencing to the end. And that wasn't the best idea.